All right, good evening. Greetings to the Lakewood Reinvestment Authority meeting for Monday, March 4th. I call to order this meeting at 6:06 p.m. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Chair Strom.
Here.
Commissioners Barraway.
All right, good evening.
Here.
Greetings.
Cruz.
All right, good evening. Lakewood Reinvestment Authority meeting for Lakewood Reinvestment Authority.
Oh, hang on one second.
Monday, March 4th, I call to order this meeting at, will the clerk please call the roll? PM.
Chair
Will the
Strom.
clerk please call the roll?
Chair Strom. Commissioners Barraway.
All right, good evening.
Commissioners Barraway.
All right, good evening. Lakewood Reinvestment
Cruz.
Authority. All right, good evening. Lakewood Reinvestment Authority.
Oh, hang on one second.
Lakewood Reinvestment Authority.
Sorry about that. Commissioner Cruz.
Here.
Kenworthy. I'm not sure she joined. Kerr.
Here.
LeVure.
Here.
Lowe.
Here.
Mayock Guerrero.
Here.
Nystrom.
She's an attendee, and Erin Kenworthy just popped in there as well.
Great. Thank you. Let's come back to them. Over.
Here.
Ryan.
Yes.
Sharzai.
Here.
Sinks.
Here.
Stewart.
Here.
Wolfram.
Here.
And again, Kenworthy
Here.
and Nystrom.
Here.
Madam Chair, you have a quorum.
All right. Well, welcome everybody. We have tonight a presentation about the Urban Renewal District basics and the steps in which to take to form a new renewal project. So we'll be hearing tonight from Mr. Robert Smith, our Lakewood Reinvestment Authority Executive Director. And as of this afternoon, there were, I think it ended up being maybe two comments on Lakewood Speaks. And one update I'll give everyone too, that Lakewood Speaks, Mr. Rob, can you correct me if this is different for the LRA meeting, but Lakewood Speaks does remain open. So I'll point out as we get further through the meeting if there are any other comments that we may want to look at before we adjourn, as we're also going through our questions and discussion later on. But first of all, I'd like to say a big welcome to Commissioner Kenworthy, who is recently joining us and replacing Commissioner Miller from the Jefferson County School District. So welcome, Commissioner Kenworthy. And we've got an onslaught of new counselors as well. So excited to see everybody's new faces. Or I should say commissioners, sorry, from City Council. And with that, I'll go ahead and hand it over to you, Mr. Smith. You've got the mic.
Thank you so kindly, Chair Strom. Happy to be here and happy to welcome all of the new commissioners. For several folks in this meeting tonight, this is a first LRA meeting for them, and so we wanted to give some basics in terms of what urban renewal is all about, and also the formation of some new areas. We'll have a lot of energy around 2024, a lot of good plans coming forward, and so I want to make certain that everyone's feeling comfortable with what's expected of them through this board arrangement. We have tentatively scheduled an LRA business meeting every month, and it will be on the first Monday of the month. That's normally a study session for the council, but the LRA meetings are conducted virtually or in a hybrid sort of a format if the council is in the chambers. But generally speaking, we're here on Zoom talking about things largely because we don't have enough chairs for everybody up on the dais in the area. There are 15 members of the LRA Board of Commissioners. As Chair Strom mentioned, a little different titles over here. All of you folks are known as commissioners. And of course, it wouldn't be an LRA meeting if I didn't make the humorous observation that the only one that's a commissioner outside of this, as far as I know, is Mr. Kerr. So he's technically Commissioner Andy Kerr. So we can address him with two commissioners over the top. Everyone else is a commissioner. And then, of course, the chair is the same role as the mayor in the city council meeting. So with that, I'm going to share my screen and run through a lot of the basics here, a lot of material. There'll be some opportunity to ask questions throughout and then at the tail end as well. And then I've got a little bit of an executive report at the end where I'll give you some updates on some of the activities that the LRA is engaged in recently. So let me take a moment to get my screen shared here. And I will ask the question, can everyone see the screen at this point? I've got a thumbs up, so I'll just go ahead and start the presentation. We're talking about urban renewal basics and the forming of the new urban renewal project areas. And we'll just go through all of the materials on here. So the foundation of the Urban Renewal Authority, and the Urban Renewal Authority is a separate unit of government from the City Council. So your participation in this group is a completely different unit of government. So it is very much a different hat than when you're sitting on City Council or you're sitting in the boards from the other taxing entities you represent. Our basis for urban renewal is the Urban Renewal Law. It's Colorado Revised Statute 3125-101 et seq. That's a Latin term that just basically means everything that follows that in the 31 there. Colorado passed what we call the Colorado Urban Redevelopment Fairness Act all the way back in 2015. It was implemented in 2016. And that's the reason that we have an expanded board, whereas some other urban renewal authorities are still operating on the same board that they had prior to that time. Lakewood City Council Resolution 1998 was the resolution when it was moved forward. It was the fourth resolution of that year, and it formed the Urban Renewal Authority. There was a vote of the people immediately in front of that. So the question to the voters that year was, would you like to form an Urban Renewal Authority that would do a variety of different things in the community? The voters said yes. And so then it was formed in 1998, about 25 years ago, or more than 25 years ago. And then, of course, Lakewood City Council did a resolution in 2022 that made us compliant with that statute that I mentioned before. A lot of times it's referred to as 1348 because that was the House bill that said that we needed to expand the board so that we include representatives from the county and the school district and special districts, and then one that's at large. So what's the purpose of urban renewal? There are basically three that we list here, but they really all boil down to the first one. And that first one is mitigating blighting conditions within project areas. And we'll talk what project areas are, but the statute's very defined in terms of a project area is a collection of properties that are in an urban renewal area. When we take on different tasks and whatnot, those are often called activities or undertakings. And we'll go over that in just a minute here. But from a project area standpoint, we're trying to mitigate blighting conditions. Second thing we try to do is facilitate private investment within those project areas. Third thing we do is enhance Lakewood's ability to preserve and restore the vitality and the quality of life within those project areas. If you think about it, all the last two really feed into that first one of mitigating those blighting conditions. As I mentioned, it's a separate unit of government, so you see that separation up on the screen. In the light blue area, it shows you City Council. City Council has 11 seats. One of the tasks that they do with regard to urban renewal is they designate the blighted urban renewal areas that are called projects. And we have 4 projects currently in the Lakewood Reinvestment Authority portfolio, if you will, of urban renewal projects. There's one on Colfax and Wadsworth, sometimes referred to as Creekside. A lot of folks know it as the Super Walmart on the corner of Colfax and Wadsworth. There's Alameda Corridor number 1. It had a 25-year increment capture. We'll talk a little bit more about that. It's 25 years expired in 2023. It still exists and will continue as kind of a legal entity until we finish up all of the activities that we've got going in the Alameda Corridor number 1. So it will continue on even though we're no longer collecting revenue from it. Having said that, I will say that property taxes is where the revenue stream for urban renewal comes, and we receive those in arrears. So the 2023 property taxes are being paid right now. So we're still receiving the 2023 property taxes for the Alameda Corridor 1 area. There's Alameda Corridor 2. A lot of folks refer to that as Belmar. And then from Sims to Sheridan along the Colfax corridor, about 700 properties in that one. On the right-hand side, you see the LRA Board of Commissioners. It's 15 seats. And I'll just remind you right now, Urban Renewal Authority and Urban Renewal generally is the same as Lakewood Reinvestment Authority. We just call our Urban Renewal Authority by a different name, and that's the Lakewood Reinvestment Authority. So what does the LRA Board of Commissioners do? They oversee the implementation of those project plans for each of those project areas. They oversee the tasks, which I mentioned are called activities or undertakings for each of those areas. You do things as a board by approving resolutions. You don't pass ordinances as you do on city council. The LRA doesn't have that authority. We can also declare proclamations, but to the best of my knowledge, we really haven't done proclamations in the Urban Renewal Authority. We generally do all of our action taking through a resolution. We approve an annual budget, and that's also done by resolution. That process mirrors the city's process. So we begin somewhere in August, and generally we have an approved budget by October. The LRA budget I hold in my hands right here. This is the paper version of it. It's online. About the last 5-6 budgets are online as well. You might notice there's a little difference in the LRA budget, a little thinner than the city's budget on here. But this is how we allocate resources in the LRA. We submit that approved budget to the Department of Local Affairs with the state, and so they can take a look at it. And so let's talk a little bit about forming a new urban renewal area. These are the first steps that happen there. We do some informal talk with property owners. We've been doing that as staff for about the last 2 years or so. We've talked with large property owners. We've talked with property owners in between, but essentially it's really to educate them on what urban renewal does, and what it could do in those areas. And so they get a presentation, or at least a conversation that mirrors much of what we're talking about right now. You formally observe those areas of the city and you say, hey, are the blighting conditions in this area, do we think? And when I say the blighting conditions, there are 11 of them. We'll be going over them in a moment. But that's, when folks say, well, I sort of know what blight looks like or what it is, but I'm not exactly sure, we're going to tell you exactly what it is under the state statute. And so those conditions are the ones we look for. And then we kind of identify an area to formally study if we want to go into an urban renewal area, or we have an interest in at least taking a look at that. We've done that with the Sheridan corridor. We talked about this in the LRA last summer about the potential for a brand new area that's along the Sheridan corridor. And we've identified that area on the map. There's 272 properties in there. And we started that process at the very tail end of 2023, and it will continue into 2024. We'll talk more about what that means overall. But what happens at the start of it is we do what's called a condition survey. Many people refer to it as a blight study. And essentially, we hire a third party to go out and take a look to see, of those 11 conditions of blight, how many of them are present in the area that we're studying. So if you think about the properties along the Sheridan corridor, might there be some conditions of blight there? If you're thinking in your head, yeah, probably there are. These fine folks are going to document that, put that into a report, and present that report to the first to the Planning Commission and then to the City Council. I'm sorry, I want to go back here real quick. I wanted to mention that there's no intrusiveness to the property. So you see those pictures off to the side, that represents essentially how this condition survey is done. That consultant that I mentioned drives around, they're looking for those conditions, and it's what you can see from the public rights of way. So nobody hops a fence or looks at the property behind the scenes. They look and see what you can see from the public rights of way and document those features and that report for the condition survey. So we'll mention this theoretical area, this kind of fictional area that we've made up to illustrate some of the points. For some of the commissioners, you've been through this presentation a time or two before. This should be a good refresher. For some of the new folks, this may come as brand new news for you. But essentially under the statute, urban renewal areas need to be drawn as narrowly as possible to achieve the goals under that Colorado urban renewal law. And so you've got a map up here. And again, it's a fictional example. I'm going to shade part of that map in pink. And you can see that map is in pink. And those represent roads. So it's as if we're looking at a fictional city from above. Those roads are very tight and dense. Those are residential areas. Generally speaking, when you're forming an urban renewal area, you don't want to include residential properties. And there's various sundry reasons for that, and we can talk about those at some other time. But essentially, you're trying to get commercial properties into the urban renewal area. You see over on the far right of this slide, there's kind of a yellow area that says the next community over. And then you see Main Street kind of separates the areas of the commercial properties from that yellow area. You might conveniently think about that Main Street like Sheridan Boulevard, because Denver's off to that side. Sheridan Boulevard is here, and Lakewood's to the east or to the left of that. So it kind of has that feel to it. It's obviously a fictional example, but here you are. You see there's a variety of properties in there, and the roads and whatnot are bigger in between them. That's how we represent that commercial area. So we can't form an area outside of our jurisdiction, so we can't make an urban renewal area that continues into the city of Denver. So it has to be on our side of it. So the area that in this example that we're looking at is in between Central Avenue and between Main Boulevard, and includes 18th, 10th, and 1st Street, all of those made up. You see some of those properties, those commercial properties, they're marked in green right now. Those properties might have, let's say, 9 of the 11 conditions of blight. So they might not be the same 9, but they have 9 and are present on those particular properties. On these ones that I've marked in red, might be 5 or 6 conditions of blight. According to urban renewal law, no property has to have all 11 conditions to make the urban renewal project come forward. It just has to have some of those characteristics throughout the whole of the area. This blue one, maybe there's 3 or 4 conditions of blight on those properties in there of those 11. When you put them all together and you see all of those green areas, those dark green areas, that means they have some level of conditions of blight. So it looks like this is an area that has a preponderance of the conditions of blight in this area. Now you might notice that some of them are left blank. Maybe they've only got 1 or 2 conditions of blight, maybe potentially 0 theoretically, but those areas are included in the urban renewal area because of continuity purposes or contiguity purposes they want to go through. You see a couple of little properties that are along Central Avenue that are still white. That might be a situation where the condition survey comes back and we say, okay, the area that we want to inform or form, we don't want to use those properties because we want to draw it narrowly as possible. And so the boundary of this particular urban renewal area might be somewhere to the east of Central Avenue and not include those properties that don't have those strong conditions of blight. So let's talk about this in the real world. This is a map of the city of Lakewood. As I mentioned, there are 4 areas that are in our Urban Renewal Authority purview. You see them on there. There's a dark blue one that runs along east and west along Colfax Avenue. And then there's a little slightly smaller one that's in a light blue. That light blue is the Creekside property. That's the Walmart that's there along Wadsworth and Colfax. The dark blue is the Colfax area. Sheridan is over to the right. Sims is over to the left. Alameda is down below. Let's talk about each of those areas. I've highlighted what is called Alameda 1. It's the Alameda corridor, and it has the number 1 on it. You'll notice that it doesn't include what most folks consider Belmar proper. It doesn't have that area to the east of Wadsworth in there. So this Alameda 1, that increment capture ended in 2023, as I mentioned. The former Chalet Motel project is in this area. And we're going to do an update and talk about that in just a little bit. I should say the former Chalet activity or undertaking is in the Alameda 1 area. We did a project with the Alameda bid out there to provide some grants for mitigating blighting conditions for properties and businesses along the corridor. We'll give you an update on that in just a short while. And then this revolving loan fund that the LRA Commission approved in 2023 and we're implementing in 2024. I'll give you an update on that as well. The next urban renewal area that'll finish that 25-year capture period is Colfax and Wads. Again, this is that super Walmart that's up on the corner there. You see it highlighted with that kind of glowy gold ring around it. It will end this year. So the increment capture for that property or that project will end this year, and we'll do the wind up things that we need to do for that project. And essentially our path forward is to complete the Creekside undertaking. That's the whole of that shopping area that includes Super Walmart, but it's all of the properties that also front along Colfax, the Colfax area. And many of you know there's a drainage area that's in there, very well maintained. It's got grass and bridges over it and that sort of thing. That's what the urban renewal activity for that project was the Creekside Shopping Center. Alameda 2, again, Belmar, and the property taxes are collected in arrears. 2025 is the last year for collection on that one. We'll complete the income rent capture for that area, and then we'll continue to make all of the commitments that are still in the Belmar area happen. Most of the LRA commitments fall by the wayside in 2025. The Colfax corridor, that's now outlined in gold, about 700 properties in there. That increment capture ends in 2030. So 25 years from when it was formed. It was formed in 2005. We'll talk a little bit more about that. But some of the projects, some of the activities in that project, station betterment, those are the two light rail stations. One's at Wadsworth itself, just a little bit to the east of Wadsworth. To the west of Wadsworth is the Oak Street station. And you see a lot of artwork and some enhancements over in those particular stations. Those were courtesy of the Lakewood Reinvestment Authority. The former Blue Sky Motel, which we'll give you an update on here tonight, is in this Colfax area. What may be coming up on the horizon in the not too distant future that the LRA will have some input to is a potential Westland redevelopment project. A lot of folks know that Westland Town Center that's a little bit west of Kipling, right along Colfax, used to be the home of the Westland Town Center in the Westland Mall in the old days. And we may wind up with a property acquisition in that area in the next year or two. This is the area that we're going to give you a little bit more update on. We talked about it last summer in July, but it's the potential Sheridan corridor area. You see it outlined in the orange there, right along there. It hugs Sheridan for the most part. It's got two flags that go to the west towards deeper into the city. That first flag goes all the way out to about Marshall, which is just a little bit to the west of Lamar. And then you see that other flag that's down on 6th Avenue. A lot of industrial projects down there. A lot of folks know that area because they see it as you drive on 6th Avenue. And then a little bit below, all the way down to about 1st Avenue, roughly. That's the area. As I mentioned, 272 properties out there. We sent out letters at the tail end of 2023, in December of 2023. And in January and February, we've had the opportunity to talk with a lot of property owners because that letter says, hey, we're doing a conditions survey for these reasons out here. And you as a property owner or a business owner in the area ought to know about that. And if you have questions, give me a call. So I have the opportunity to chat with folks that call up and ask questions. And again, we talk to them about these kinds of same things that we're talking about with you this evening. So Lakewood Reinvestment Authority and the City Council. I'm going to take a moment to talk a little bit about the City Council. That's why the blue is on the left, as you saw before. The last time we did a new urban renewal area was 2005, and that's that West Colfax project. You see on the right side of the screen, the actual covers from the documents that came forward to council. One is that condition survey again, or that blight study that said there were lots of conditions of blight in those 700 or so properties along Colfax Avenue. And then that second document, that kind of a little bit less artistic cover over there, that's the urban renewal redevelopment plan. So essentially it said, hey, we know there's conditions of blight here. This is what we're going to do over the next 25 years to mitigate those conditions of blight. And it's a fairly generalized sort of a plan. It talks about all of the things that we might want to do, all of the things that we're allowed statutorily to do under urban renewal, a lot of different elements to that, but it's a fairly substantial document. If any of you commissioners want to take a look at either of these documents, I'm happy to share those with you. But again, they're for an area that's already been formed. Sheridan will be coming forward, presumably in 2024. So the City Council would receive that conditions of blight survey and determine if conditions of blight are sufficient for forming an urban renewal area. And then they would take an action that's called findings of blight or certifying those findings of blight. They would approve the urban renewal project plan. So the sense of we've discovered that or determined that there are these conditions of blight out there. What are we going to do about it? Here's the plan that gets us from where we are to where we want to be. That plan's largely set up for a 25-year horizon. We wind up doing some internal plans that have shorter horizons. What are we going to do in the next 5 years, the next 10 years that fits within the big 25-year plan, but gives us a direction that's more immediate. The Sheridan project will likely come before the Planning Commission in spring of 2024. One of the parts of the statute is that the Planning Commission takes the first look at those two documents, condition survey and that urban renewal plan, and they make a recommendation to the council. And they say, yes, we believe that there are conditions sufficient for blight, and we believe this urban renewal plan meets all the statutory requirements and addresses the ability to mitigate blighting conditions in this area. The Sheridan project then comes a little bit later to the council, and it comes with that recommendation from the Planning Commission. And those things are slated roughly for spring, so think in that late April-ish, early May-ish kind of time frame. That's probably when those documents will get to council. If council approves the urban renewal plan, and if council has a determination of conditions of blight or findings of blight for the area, then we have a new area formed here. Now, where does the LRA Board of Commissioners come in? We need to form intergovernmental agreements or IGAs with all of the taxing entities that are in that Sheridan corridor area. So we would have an IGA with the county. These are all three-party agreements. So the county would be one party to the agreement. The city council would be a second party to the agreement. The third is the LRA board. The LRA board would be a third approver of those IGAs. And there would be an IGA for each of those taxing entities. So there would be one for the school district, there'd be one for the county, there would be one for all of the special districts that are out there, regardless of how many of those there are, and we would make those IGAs happen. Now, the timeline for that is set in statute, but we feel that we were the first city in Jefferson County to voluntarily expand our board. And part of the reason for that is not only was it the right thing to do, but it's also the opportunity for folks to understand what the Urban Renewal Authority has been doing on the projects that we have currently, and that if we form a new area, there's a deeper understanding of what will happen there. So that's the reason why we expanded our board early. We hear rumors out in the world that our friends in Wheat Ridge are getting ready to expand the board. We think our friends in Arvada and perhaps Golden may be expanding the board sometime soon. And so we're out there about helping them figure out the path to making that happen. So going back into the powers of the Urban Renewal Authority, just going to rattle those off real quick. We can sue and be sued. I hope we don't exercise that power anytime soon. We can negotiate, we can enter into contracts, we can take other actions required for urban renewal. And again, we take all of those actions via a resolution. Staff brings the resolution to the board, and then the board considers it and approves it if there's a majority that want to support that resolution. We can help develop appropriate regulations for buildings and land use. We can contribute to the city's process of, what's the zoning in this area? What can we do to make regulations for buildings even stronger? Those are things we can take on. We can survey and study blighted areas. Those have to occur within urban renewal areas proper, because that's your area of jurisdiction, if you will, are those areas that are in the urban renewal portfolio of projects. But we can take those surveys and do those blighted areas. We can borrow and invest funds. When we go, if we were to bond against the increment in the Sheridan area, that bonding is kind of a fancy form of borrowing money. So we would borrow that money potentially and use it to do implement the things that are in the urban renewal plan. That's a thing that we can do. And when I say we, you can do. You folks are on the decision end of that. We can condemn property if authorized by the city council. That's a complex process. Doesn't happen very often. I'll let you know, to the best of my knowledge, it's only happened twice in the city of Lakewood. Both of those elements were involved in the old Villa Italia Mall being converted into Belmar. It's not one that you really want to have on the top of your list of things to do, which just doesn't happen all that often. But it is a power that the Urban Renewal Authority has. We can acquire, manage, and dispose of property. I mentioned that the LRA purchased a motel on Alameda. We purchased one on Colfax. We acquired those with a willing buyer and a willing seller. And so we acquired those properties. We're managing them now. We're mitigating the asbestos and the environmental contaminating conditions, mostly just the asbestos. And then we can what's called dispose of the property. But what that means is we put it back out to the private sector for some sort of productive use. And we'll talk a little bit more about what that means with the motels when we do that update at the tail end. We can implement plans for repair, rehabilitation, and the demolition of buildings or improvements that are dilapidated and causing problems in our community. And then another thing that we can do, these are all outlined in the statute, we can compensate individuals and businesses for relocation impacts. That was something that was used quite a bit as the old Villa Italia Mall was converted into Belmar. There was some compensation to move folks that were in a mall that weren't quite ready to be into Belmar and that sort of a thing. That happened a lot, but really hasn't happened in most of the years since that start of Belmar. I'll re-mention again that the statutory authorization, the one that we've mentioned before, the 3125-101 and all the things that follow that, is to eliminate slum and blight. So anytime if you're in an LRA commissioners meeting and you're saying to yourself, I wonder if this is something we should be pursuing, you can ask yourself that question. Will what we intend to do eliminate slum and blight? And if the answer is yes, we're probably on the right track. So that's a way to do it. It's not about job creation. It's not about economic development. It's not about trying to increase tax revenue. It's really about eliminating those slum and blight conditions. But the thing is that when you eliminate those blighting conditions, it almost always results in additional job creation, additional economic development, and additional increase in the tax revenue. Those aren't our objectives, but they're something that falls out once we eliminate those blighting conditions. So I mentioned this before, there's 11 conditions. I'm not going to go through all of them. We certainly can talk about them. And of course, any of the commissioners is more than welcome to contact me. And I'm happy to spend some time discussing any of the things that we discussed tonight and talk a little bit more about what these mean and that sort of thing. Just as a caveat, because we are a public entity, we do have all of the same sunshine laws that the council would have, or the boards that you serve on if you're not a member of the city council. So, well, two of you talking to one another is great, but if we get three, that's considered a public meeting and we have to notice it and do all of those sorts of things with it. Anyone can call me and talk with me. I don't have any votes or influence over that. I just want to help make it easy to be a commissioner here on the LRA board. Some of these conditions here on the statutory blighting conditions, one there over on the right-hand column about midway down, buildings that are unsafe or unhealthy for people to live and work in. You might think about buildings that, ooh, those are kind of scary. All right, above that is ones that condition that endanger life or property by fire or other causes. One of the motels that we purchased, the one up on Colfax, was unfortunately had a fire in it in 2019, severely damaged the property. Thank goodness no one was hurt in there, and none of our first responders and firefighters was hurt or endangered too deeply on there. But it caught fire because it's a bad building. You can see all through all of those. And those are things you might expect to be involved there. One of the questions I get on a regular basis is, what happens to the value of a property if it's designated with an urban renewal area? There are folks that are like, oh my gosh, it's a bad thing that happens in there. Well, there are no studies that have shown a reduction in that property value. Appraisers are not allowed to say, you're in an urban renewal area, so we've got to take some money off the value of the property. In fact, some studies have shown that the property actually goes up in value because what it's indicating is that an authority is taking the time, the energy, and the effort to try to mitigate blighting conditions in that area, and that each of those properties will benefit from those blight mitigation. That rising tide, if you will, lifts up the value of all the properties in the area. That's what's been most demonstrated. I'll mention this one more time because I want to make certain it's clear in the heads there. IGAs with the taxing entities. So if the urban renewal area is formed by council, area is designated, and the urban renewal plan is approved, we have to form these agreements with the other taxing entities, these intergovernmental agreements. Staff's been working with the staffs of all of the entities that are taxing in the area. The most prominent, of course, being the county, the school district, the fire, the West Metro Fire District, some of the special districts, the water districts, those folks. We've had good relations staff to staff, so that we're hopeful that those IGAs can be put into place and everyone can have their boards approve them, and then we have the city council board approve them, and then we have the LRA board approve them. So all three parties to those will be able to approve them and realize that they work for them. Historically, Lakewood has always approved the blight designation and the urban renewal development redevelopment plan at the exact same time. So you see on there that Council Resolution 1999, number 70, that's the one that found the conditions of blight for the Colfax and Wadsworth Creekside project, and also approved the urban renewal redevelopment plan for that area on that same night in that same resolution. And you see that start date there, that 1999. And that's why we're at 2024, where that one's going to wrap up. And you see the other ones over on the side as well. Wanted to take a moment to talk a little bit about property valuations. I've been talking a little bit about increment and land values and whatnot. Wanted to break this down so that hopefully it's a little little fresher in your mind on exactly how this increment gets developed and how the revenue winds up coming to the Urban Renewal Authority to mitigate those blighting conditions. Property values are made up of basically two things: the land, which is often referred to as the dirt, and the improvements that are a part of that land. So I've got that brown line over on the right side. That represents a cross section. If we're looking at a cross section of a property, that brown area is the land or the dirt that we see right on there. And you can see at this point, nothing on top of that. So no buildings, no improvement. There's nothing below it in terms of maybe water conveyance systems or electrical utilities or other kinds of utilities that are under the ground. If we put in those pipes under the ground, that increases the value of the project. And so increasing that value or creating an incremental increase to the value of the property can occur just subterranean. In other words, we're making it more valuable by the fact that we're adding on these utilities. But for the most part, most people think of it in terms of what are the things on top of it, the buildings, the parking lots, the landscaping, those sorts of things. Those are the improvements. And when you get your tax bill, generally speaking, you'll see a separation between those two. What's the land value? What's the improvement values that are on that particular property? So when we form an urban renewal area, at that date that we say we've got an urban renewal area formed over there, all of the value of the land and improvements that were there the day before that was designated, that's known as the base. So that's the base level of the value of the property. Any improvements that come forward after that are known as the increment. And these are not just normal rises in the value of property because property values generally go up or building values generally go up. These are increments where there's something new and more highly valued on that property than there was before. A very simple example of that was if there was a vacant property, that might be worth $100. If we build a building on top of it, that building is now worth $200. If the urban renewal was formed before the building was built, that $200, the taxes that are associated with that $200 go back into the increment. The $100 value that was there before still is in the base, and that base goes back to the taxing authority. So both the increment and the base, they increase or decrease based on the value of the market as it comes up. Most of us are aware of the fact that between 2020 and roughly 2023, a lot of the values of properties went up quite dramatically. And so the taxes on those properties went up quite dramatically, and that caused some consternation and whatnot. The millage that's on there doesn't change at all, even if there's an urban renewal authority. It's really the exact same tax that gets kind of split between that increment and that base. I'll give you another example of that here in just real short order. I did want to mention a couple of myths that are out there. People share these, and these are just simply not true. The base isn't frozen in time. So in other words, nobody can say that when you form that urban renewal authority, you froze the value of my property. No, that's not true. The value of the property fluctuates with the market. Generally is increasing, sometimes it's decreasing, but for the most part, it's increasing. And that still occurs even with an urban renewal authority. It's a myth that property owners pay zero taxes or that taxing entities receive $0 of property values on an urban renewal area. Neither one of those is true. All of the taxing entities receive the tax value associated with the base value of the properties, and the urban renewal authority receives the amount that's associated with the increment. Taxes never go up for the property owner. We'll talk a little bit more about how that comes together. Probably this chart right here. This one is, it can put people to sleep a little bit, so I'll try not to spend too much time on it, but it's important to understand that the values go up as well as the activities that the Urban Renewal Authority does to increase that increment value. So you see over on this chart, the left-hand side, you see dollar values in there, and it's just a rough approximation, 1 million all the way up to 18 million. Along the x-axis or down below, you see years of the urban renewal project being formed, and it starts one below 0 or -1. So the day the urban renewal area is formed, that moment of 0, the base is what is there, and that includes the value of all of the properties, including the dirt and the improvements that were there on that day before the urban renewal was formed. The day after that urban renewal is formed, all of that base is still in there. The increment has to be developed over time. In other words, new investment has to come to the area. Apologize. So in between year 0 and year 1, we build something that increases the incremental value of that, and you see that blue area that's on there. So the property taxes that are associated with the values of that increment, that's what comes into the mix. And as you see over the course of time, that builds up. You can see that the base, the yellow part of this graph, goes up. That represents kind of the natural marketing flow of it. The blue indicates the value of the improvements also comes up with the market, but it's also new improvements, things that get fixed, lighting conditions that are eliminated on those private properties. And after year 10, you start to see that there's a substantial amount of the blue and there's a substantial amount of the yellow. That continues over 25 years. That's just the term of the time that's in the state statute for urban renewal. And as you can see there, all of that blue area over there, all of the property taxes that were paid that are part of the increment, those are the ones that the Urban Renewal Authority uses to mitigate blighting conditions in the project area. The base, all of the taxes that are associated with that base still go back to the taxing entities. And then when you get to that last year, after the 25th year, the 26th year, you see that the Urban Renewal Authority no longer is collecting that increment or the taxes associated with that increment or that blue area, and that all goes to the existing taxing areas. And so a lot of times you hear the argument that if not but for the activities of the urban renewal area, the value of that project area wouldn't be that great base there. So as we go into year 2024 with Alameda 1, all of the increment that we've put into place over the last 25 years will all go to those taxing entities. There'll be a perceived sort of a increase, very much strong in their collection of the property taxes. And again, the property taxes from the property owner standpoint don't change at all. There's no new tax associated with this. And that's a quick reminder on the how this gets formed. The market value of a property is not the assessed value. The assessor applies the millage to the assessed value of the property, multiplies that, or excuse me, divides that by 1,000. That's how you wind up with your annual property tax. A great example would be if the market value of a residential property is $100, the assessed value of that is right around $8. So they apply that millage to the $8 value or the assessed value there. On the commercial side, it might be as much as 29 of that $100 or 29% is where you do that. And I don't know if anybody wants to raise their hand and know that how we got there. That has to do with the Gallagher Amendment that you talked about. So we've talked about so much in public discourse over the years. Commercial property owners need to pay a certain percentage of all of the property taxes collected. Residential owners pay pay a different amount on there, so that it all balances out, so that you got that 55-45 split between those things. That's been adjusted over the last year or so, and so there's some wrinkles to it, but that's the general sense there. So why do we use this increment or this TIF? And I'll use a distinction between those. TIF is tax increment finance. In other words, we borrowed against the increment that'll be generated. The increment is the dollars that are generated that come in there. Tax increment financing is the financing mechanism that uses those incremental dollars on there. It's a subtle distinction. A lot of times you hear folks using them interchangeably. Increment's not a new tax. That's the bottom line. Not raising anyone's taxes. It's the same property taxes that everyone has been paying. Those are the same millages for all of those taxing entities. Why would we do this? Well, we may need to do extraordinary public improvements to help alleviate blighting conditions in those areas. Maybe drainage is keeping those areas down. Maybe mobility or transportation issues are keeping those things down. Maybe it's a criminality and crime, and we need to invest more time and energy into helping eliminate those kinds of conditions. The increment doesn't increase the tax rates on the existing property owners. I want to emphasize that multiple times here. The increment doesn't require that the property owners outside of the urban renewal area contribute to the project. So if you're a representative here and you know that you represent areas that aren't within the urban renewal areas as I've described them, you're still responsible in the board for making sure those areas go great. But the constituents in those areas that are outside of the urban renewal project areas are not contributing at all to the urban renewal area. It's only the property owners that are in that area. Increment captures the additional value that's created by private investment and put back into that project area. And so growth pays its own way. That's what we would like to be able to do. Just another way of saying the thing that I just expressed there. Let's say we have a blighted property. Increment of the project area is created when the base is established. The regular tax levies, the same levies that have always been in place from a property owner perspective, we're able to take those dollars as the Urban Renewal Authority, affect change that mitigates blighting conditions. The value of those properties goes up, and with that increased taxable value for those properties, the tax from that incremental value is captured, and the Urban Renewal Authority is able to use that revenue in order to affect change of those blighted areas. So the URA receives a share of the project property taxes. Sometimes the sales tax revenues, a couple of our projects have sales tax revenues associated with them. A couple of them do not. There's some differences in those areas. The URA makes that catalyst investment in a building or activity. So, for example, buying the Blue Sky was an investment of the LRA in that Colfax area. And we're hoping as we eliminate all of the criminality and the difficult conditions that are on there, that we will eliminate those blighting conditions, and that will be a catalyst for making that property much more valuable into the whole of the project area. That project results in that incremental property sales taxes, and it comes back up to the URA. And hopefully over the 25 years, this cycle repeats itself so that hopefully we can execute and implement all of the elements of the urban renewal plan. I mentioned if not before, here's a real basic way of understanding that is absent the investment of the Urban Renewal Authority or the LRA, the development or blight mitigation may not happen. It's likely that it doesn't happen on its own. When you have blighting conditions, they tend to perpetuate or decay unless there's an interceding force, that being the LRA. When we make those investments, that incremental increase available to the URA helps to reinvest in the area and bring that area up. So a couple of things that can happen. You can see that chart that we talked about before, that blue area. We can project what that increment may look like over the course of 25 years, and we can bond against it. We can borrow money from the bonding market and have that money available immediately and affect blighting mitigation circumstances immediately, and then pay it back with the increment over the course of time. We can reimburse somebody else who does that activity for us. For example, I mentioned the reimbursement agreement that we have there at the Walmart on the Creekside project. In other words, we invested, we built those creek areas or those drainage improvements, and then we reinvest that or reimburse that payment over the course of time. I see Mr. LeBure has his hand raised. Chair, would you like me to take that question now, or should we save it for a little bit later?
Whatever works best for you.
I can certainly take, I don't know how complicated the question will be, but we can only be here for 7 minutes. So,
well, that's the reason I figured I'd jump in. But softball question, just wondering, are there already plans in the works for any of those type of things? Do we have any projections on what kind of increment we can expect, or any plans to bond in the future? Have those discussions happened?
There are no plans for the existing areas that we have right now, but in the Sheridan corridor, there's been some discussion that might be a good way to go with that. If that Sheridan corridor is to come to fruition, all of the pieces fall into place, that might be a way to affect some change in that Sheridan corridor.
Great. Thanks, Robert.
You bet. There are other methods, and we certainly could talk about those at some other time. If you apply those tools, we may ask you to apply those tools, and you do a but-for. If the urban renewal plan is already in place, if the proposed activity is consistent with the plan goals, and the activity would not occur absent the tax increment support, that's the but-for argument. So that's a way to weigh whether the activity makes some sense to do in an urban renewal. There's the gap analysis, which is the private sector has a gap between what they can invest on the side and what they can get on the outside there, because we need to do something with it. The middle example is the one that's probably easiest to understand. Most folks know about Broadway and I-25. There is an old Gates rubber factory plant that's there. That was redeveloped over the course of time. Lots of environmental contamination on that site. It was an industrial site for many, many years. So the private sector could not obtain that site, mitigate those blighting or those environmental conditions, and make a go of it there. So the Urban Renewal Authority down there had to figure out a way to fill in that gap. How do we get the environmental thing cleaned up so that the private sector can come in and invest in there? That's an example of that. There's oversized or regional infrastructure. No one property owner would fix all of the drainage that runs along the Colfax corridor. Those are regional improvements. So the Urban Renewal Authority contributing to those kinds of improvements makes some sense. So we have a statutory authority that's fairly big in the LRA. We have political will, and you're all very familiar with those political forces out there that are working with it. Most of the time, the LRA is working in that relatively small area in between those two. So where we have statutory authority and political will, and it makes sense, that's where we're normally investing those dollars. We try not to get too far ahead of ourselves politically based on our statutory authority. And we also make certain that the political will is considered in that process so that it's good for all of the community. With that, I'll leave it to the questions and discussions right now. I'll go ahead and stop sharing my screen if that's all right with everyone over here. I see that Commissioner Mayat Guerrero has raised her hand, and I'm happy to entertain that if that's okay with you, Chair.
Absolutely.
I recognize, thank you, Chair. I recognize the time is such that we likely won't really be able to chew on this question because it's a little bit of a bigger one. But given that we are in our new year with all of our new commissioners, I wanted to put it out there that I'm really curious to learn more about, in a time when the rate of the cost of property, even in an urban renewal area, is going up by a huge amount. And again, even at a time as the market is softening at this moment, we're really seeing just the intensity for people who have owned their homes here for a long time, struggling to keep up with the taxes, not because we're increasing the taxes, but because when the rates of property costs or of the assessments are going up so much, it does end up having this impact. And so I would really love for us as a body to, if others are interested, to learn more about thinking of how the LRA may approach projects at a time where we know that actually doubling down on increasing property cost is controversial and also difficult. Again, given that if not for the LRA, but I think it's just a little bit different in today's property climate and market than it perhaps has been in past years. So I don't know if, Mr. Smith, you already have things in your mind where you're thinking about that, or if other urban renewal districts, if this is something that's being talked about in general, but it is something I'd be really, really interested in at a future meeting, us all being able to learn more about what's possible.
You bet. I've jotted this down as something that the LRA may want to talk about sometime in a future meeting, and we certainly can do that. The immediate response that I would say to you is that for most of our urban renewal areas, there aren't a lot of residential properties within those urban renewal areas. There are a few. There's some smattering of examples where we have residential properties inside the urban renewal area, but for the most part, these are commercial properties. And so that thought of folks in a residential sort of a thing, dealing with the large increases in value of the properties, that's not the lion's share of what happens in the Urban Renewal Authority. So if we were looking to the residential component of that, there's not a lot of meat to work with for the LRA. It doesn't mean that we couldn't consider doing something with it, just means that there's not a lot to work with. For the most part, commercial properties are what's in urban renewal project areas.
I do mean it in terms of both, just for clarity, since I know that we'll be able to continue this discussion, but I mean both in terms of cost to local business, entrepreneurs, individual owners of buildings or rent, right, going up at that level. But then I also mean like the neighboring residential. So I know that there's not a lot of residential within an urban renewal area, but the couple of blocks right off of it, and how is that getting impacted? But wanting to obviously balance that with like really investing in wonderful things as the way that the LRA has and does. So just, I think, just making the space and time for us to be able to chew on that as a body, given our sort of changing landscape, is what I would be really interested in.
You bet. I've got it jotted down here, and we're going to figure out how best to chew on it, as you said. That makes some sense. Are there other questions on that presentation? Otherwise, I'll do a real quick recap. We're at 7 o'clock, and I can do this within a couple of minutes, and we won't push the city council meeting too late. More, maybe 5 minutes tops, if that's all right with you, Chair. Okay, I want to give you a quick update on the two projects that we talked about motel-wise. The one on Alameda, the former chalet, we obviously acquired that property. We mitigated the asbestos conditions over there, and we've demolished that structure. We now have a vacant lot over there. And I will reiterate once again, vacant buildings are bad. That's a problem. Vacant buildings cause all kinds of consternation for the community. Vacant properties without those kinds of criminal attracting sorts of nuisance properties are better, and that's what we've got at the chalet. And then we're moving forward with, we'll do a study of that. We'll have a little quick use study on there. In other words, what would be some of the things that would make sense from a market demand, and some things that we've asked that consultant to take a look at. Affordable housing, everything that's within the zoning classification, so commercial and office and any number of those kinds of things. We'll have a report back that says the most likely from a demand in the market study are these types of uses. We will get that report back. We'll do probably an RFQ for that property. That will happen probably at the beginning of May. At the tail end of May, we'll do an RFP. So there'll be a proposal process where the private sector can come and say, hey, I'd like to acquire this property from you, and here's what we'd like to do. Staff will vet those proposals, and then we will bring those proposals back to the Urban Renewal Authority Board with a recommendation that says, hey, we got 4 proposals. We think this proposal is the one that we should most pursue. At that point, the board would say, yes, let's go forward with that one, or no, let's go forward with another one. And we would have a preferred developer. That preferred developer, we would try to make a contract happen based on that proposal. I don't want to get too far out in front of us because there's a lot of things to consider. But for example, on the chalet, we paid $3 million for that property. We demolished the structure that was on there, so the value of the property is less at this point. We took some other additional dollars in order to do that demolition and fix that. We entered into that gap. So when we do the proposal, will we wind up with a proposal that makes us whole in those costs? Probably not. Maybe. We don't know because we don't have those proposals yet. But what should be recognized is that we as the Urban Renewal Authority are not subject to that. What we're subject to is trying to make certain that blighting conditions are not likely to occur on that property in the future. So we don't necessarily have to make our money back. We always like making the money back, but that's not the primary consideration. Would we like to see some kind of a use on there that's specific, an XYZ use on there? Maybe we'd like to see that. So we'd like to encourage that, even though the zoning allows for a variety of other uses, the LRA board may say, hey, we think this is going to mitigate blighting conditions on this property into the future, and we'd like to pursue that. That's happening with both properties, both motel properties, and the timing is the same. I did want to mention that the blue sky is not down yet, and this is a source of consternation for me each and every day. We're seconds away from getting that done. We're right now held up in a permit process with the state that has to do with the asbestos mitigation. We've done everything, or we believe we've done everything to mitigate the asbestos that's on the site. We just have to get that check off from the state so that we can demolish it. So we will let you guys know that, probably with a couple of days notice, that we're going to be out there knocking that down as you instructed us or directed us to do back in 2023. So we'll let you know when that occurs. I did want to mention a couple of other projects real quick. And again, I know we're coming up on 5 after 7. One is the Alameda bid grant process. That was in Alameda 1. This board approved giving the Alameda bid a grant of about $300,000 so they could go out and give grants to property owners along that Alameda corridor. They're in the process of doing it. They're knocking it out of the park, and we're very proud of our partnership with the Alameda Business Improvement District. Some of you may have seen a story on, I think it was Channel 4 a couple of weeks ago, where they were talking about doing some safety improvements with the West Metro housing property on that corridor. And so those dollars are going to be deployed there. The revolving loan fund that you approved last year, that will be launching it. What the idea was to launch it in the first quarter of 2024. We've been working on that process, and we will be launching that on the 15th of this month. So March 15th will be on that process. We will be visiting or trying our best to visit with 760 entities along the Alameda corridor. Those are property owners, business owners, and the idea is to say, can you do this low-cost loan, below prime sort of a loan, good terms, that sort of a thing, and fix up your property, get some of those blighting conditions with the property fixed up. If all of those things go correctly, we can also forgive some of those loans and turn them into grants if we can get some things effectuated. It's a brand new process for everybody. We work with our partner, Colorado Enterprise Fund. They've never done a loan program that's based on mitigating blighting conditions. So we're on the cutting edge of this program, and if we are successful with it, I'm sure it's something that a lot of the other urban renewal authorities around the state will innovate. And with that, I will say those are the updates. If there are not any questions, I am completed with this process and happy to entertain whatever conversations the commission might like to have at this moment.
All right. Well, thank you, Mr. Smith. And I hope that was a good update for everybody. I learn more information every single time I hear it. So thank you so much for your time and walking through that so judiciously this evening. I will make a quick point that our April LRA meeting it will be canceled. So Mr. Smith at the top of our call mentioned that we'll be meeting the first Monday of every month. That will exclude April. So just a point to note on that. And with that, Jay, I would ask you, as we say goodbye to our non-city council commissioners, we've got our city council commissioners that will be staying on for tonight's council meeting. And I'm curious, can we get 2 minutes before we roll into that one?
Perfect. Yeah, Mayor, Channel 8 needs about 2 minutes to reset and reconnect us to the 7 o'clock, but everyone can stay on this link.
Okay.
Turn your cameras off. We did receive more comments on Lakewood Speaks for the 7 p.m. study session. So if you need something to burn 2 minutes, you can do that. So hang tight. We'll come back 7:10, 7:11.
Right.
Sound good?
Thank you. Thank you to our commissioners before you drop off.